Who is Mas Amedda? Mas Amedda was the vice chair of the Galactic Senate during Chancellor Valorum's term, a position he continued to hold as Chancellor Palpatine transformed the Republic into the Galactic Empire. Mas Amedda was a Trigarian from Champala, which is in the Inner Rim. The Trigarian species was amphibious and has life cycles like frogs, where they start out as tadpoles and then later evolve. Chagarians also tended to be a balanced and stoic society. They were really big on fixing social issues. They were aware of problems they had in their society and worked very well to fix them. They were also very wealthy and overall focused on a higher quality of life. Mas Amedda was the vice chair of the Galactic Senate at the time. Think of the vice chair as kind of like the Speaker of the House. You do hear Mas Amedda talk very briefly in the Star Wars saga, but I think the one that kind of lets you know who he is that when the Galactic Senate kind of gets into arguments, he's the person going order, it's kind of Speaker of the House or Speaker of the Senate. Think of it as second in command for the Galactic Senate, which is what he was to the to the Chancellor. Think of him as like a Vice Chancellor as well. During the times before Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, Mas Amedda was often viewed as weak-willed. He allowed bad trade decisions, and many people viewed him to be a corrupt official. He taxed the free trade zones, which led to the blockade and invasion of Naboo by the Trade Federation, which Mas Amedda was rumored to be on the payroll of. So, those are the things that kind of, in the background of Star Wars, taxing trade routes, leads to the invasion of a peaceful planet, and worked to undermine Chancellor Valorum to install Palpatine. So that's kind of how he got to keep his job. If we undermine the leader and we install a new one, I get to keep my position in second. But, I'm still not, someone that a lot of people focus on because they're focused on the top person. So I think Mas Amedda knew the position he was in, and he did anything he could to keep that position at number 2, I would say. During the Clone Wars, he was worried about During the Clone Wars, the Republic was worried about a super weapon, which ultimately ended up becoming the Death Star. They obtained this information by capturing Poggle the Lesser, and he told them that no, there's no weapon being built. But of course, the Republic Intelligence Committee disagreed with him and allowed the funding for basically the same weapon, the Death Star, more or less. And this was, part of, the vice chair's tasks in terms of what they actually do. Working, like I said, in the background of things, that there's a lot of stuff in, a Galactic Senate that, the number 2 person would have to be doing. Oftentimes, Mas Amedda is working with the military as well. This includes meeting with Duchess Satine of Mandalore, and after assassination attempts of her life, the Republic decided that Death Watch is something that they need to keep under control, that Mandalore cannot contain Death Watch. So, voting on invasions of Mandalore despite them being a neutral planet and wanted to continue being a neutral planet, which in many ways is the Republic expanding its quotations empire and consuming other planets as well to be absorbed in part of the Republic, more or less, but doing it through a good reason of, more or less, stopping Death Watch, the terrorist organization, kind of. As the Republic transformed into the Galactic Empire, Mas Amedda was given a new title of Grand Vizier. Think of him as a in-betweener, in between the Emperor and a military leader. Like I said, Mas Amedda oftentimes did a lot of military, not really a military, general or, down there fighting, but kind of deciding, what we're going to do in terms of the military planets to invade, the politics behind the military, more or less. He was in charge of restructuring the government for the Empire, which, leads to regional governors known as Moffs. He does this with Grand Moff Tarkin, alongside with Emperor Palpatine as well. And, once that was completed, alongside with Tarkin and Sidious, I guess I'll start calling him Sidious instead of Palpatine at this point, and that there is military restructuralization as well. So this includes, the transformation of the clones to the stormtroopers. This is stuff that Mas Amedda is working behind in the background with the military figures such as Tarkin and Wolf Yularen and a number of other people throughout the times of the Galactic Civil War and the Galactic Republic as well. There's a lot of stuff I'm not talking about because I feel like they're really small, but I'm trying to give you a good base background of who this character is without, giving you everything about who this character is. Mas Amedda also worked with director Krennic as well, which, kind of ties back to Poggle the Lesser when Krennic met with Poggle the Lesser to develop the Death Star. Mas Amedda worked with Krennic about testing the Death Star, that they needed planets to use to test it on, and there's conversations about that going on. But during the time of the Galactic Civil War, when Emperor Palpatine died, Amedda kind of acted as a proxy emperor. I call it the come up. He's been second all along, and now he's finally the emperor, except for people kind of viewed him only as a figurehead. He couldn't keep the empire together, and no one really ever saw him as a leader. This is kind of like a history of weak leadership, I would say, that if you look at his political career, yet very impressive, hasn't really had a lot of big accomplishments for himself. He's kind of just been like following the leader, Chancellor Valorum, to Chancellor Palpatine, to Emperor Palpatine, to Darth Sidious, and working with other people, not really ever staking his own claim or having his own political aspirations, which at the same time probably keeps him alive and also keeps his power as well. After the death of Emperor Palpatine, there was a revolt on Coruscant where Mas Amedda, stayed. And this kinda is the end of Mas Amedda being captured by the, I want to say the New Republic at this point. If the Emperor's dead, the New Republic, or basically the Resistance at this point, transitioning the power of the Empire to the New Republic by signing the Galactic Coordinates. Concordance, not coordinates, Galactic Concordance. So he does kind of, I would say, redeem himself in a little bit in terms of that way, that he does give power back to the New Republic. He realizes that the Empire is done, so he has to sign everything off to the New Republic. Like I said, his political career was very impressive. He stays at the number 2 for a very long time, while also having military influence and, political influence, but oftentimes both of those were undermined by higher people. Better experienced military generals didn't listen to him a lot of times because he's never really been on a battlefield or isn't really there for the battles. And same thing with the politics. Palpatine knew that he could kind of control him. He was weak. I think Palpatine knew that he was like a weak leader that, that he just kind of like rose the ranks, and Palpatine knew that he could control him, and also that he would get the job done and listen to whoever was in power at the time, which is very interesting considering that the Targaryen people, that their planet was very rich and prosperous, very problem-solving society, and this is things that people criticized Mas Amedda with, is that because he comes from a species on a planet that is so successful and fixes lots of social issues, him being the number 2 political leader and being, borderline corrupt and, just kind of going with the flow with things, never really taking a lot of action in terms of things. This includes, slavery with inside the Republic as well, that a lot of people were disappointed in him, and that's kind of why no one ever really saw him as a leader during his times as like the proxy emperor. I would love to see this character in the Bad Batch, the transition of the Empire to the transition of the Republic to the Empire. Mas Amedda's work in the background, Tarkin is in this. I would love an episode where it's more focused on like I said, the political stuff about the transitioning with all stuff. I do enjoy the Bad Batch for what it is right now, but I would like to see, more transitional what's going on in the world. Mas Amedda, of course, I think is playing a much bigger role in this, establishing, the new society more or less. But I would also like a book in his point of view. This character has seen a lot in terms of the galaxy. Starting from before episode 1, The Phantom Menace, and, what's leading up to that. How did he get to his level 2 position? He has a whole political rise that I would like to see, and then he kind of stays at level 2. But then he also gets to see the transition of many political powers from a very high point of view, being the vice chair of the Galactic Senate, and seeing all this stuff transitioning, what are his thoughts, what he's thinking about this. Some of this stuff I think is in a lot of Star Wars lore. I haven't, read it too much. Like I said, I kind of just go on the wiki and like read up on the characters and go off what I know. I do know that there's a lot more about this character that you can read into, but I'd really like something, even if it's a small book, discussing, what this character's point of view, or what the political, what the military strategies at this time was, to give us a more deeper understanding of the world of Star Wars. But I think this character is a very interesting one because, like I said, he's the number 2 during basically the Clone Wars, the Galactic, and the Galactic Civil War. He's been consistently the number 2 guy, which is interesting. So that's kind of the character of Mas Amedda. This was a little bit of a longer video, but there was a lot more discussed in this one. So until next video, goodbye.